Welcome to the Hudson School District podcast series, Parenting with Pride, Hormones, the awkward stage with tweens and teens.
Change is hard and changing bodies are awkward. Sometimes it's even more awkward to talk about it. If your family is caught between baby voice and baritone voice, or you need a boost of confidence in talking about hormones and body changes and all the things tween and teen, we are here for you.
All right, Allison and Leah here, Parenting with Pride podcast, coming at you as teachers and moms with our, my favorite pediatrician, Dr. Kelly Delahunty from Hudson Physicians. We adore Dr. D in our family.
Thank you.
I think people can say that their kids hate going to the doctor. Mine don't. They think it's so great, and they tell you kind of anything.
Oh,
they're an open book, those three.
They are very open, and it's a lovely thing. And that is really one of the important things about having your annual exams is that you come to know that provider as part of the family, and it helps keep lines of communication open.
Well, and just being able to ask questions. Like I can ask you questions as the mom, and I feel very supported, not just my three boys. So we're going to get right into it.
Great.
I feel like we need a sound effect here, but hormones.
Dun, dun, dun,
Dun, dun, dun.
Indeed.
What are hormones? Like, what are they? What's happening to our kids that's making them
Crazy. Yes. So hormones are chemicals that sort of allow our bodies to transition from being itty bitties to full-grown adult males and females. And it's a really strange process. It's, I think many parents feel like they'd like their child to be in a chrysalis when they make this transition, but it doesn't happen that way in humans. So,
unfortunately.
Yes, as early as 8 to 9, we start to see some of the hormonal shifting. And there's a signal that happens in the brain that signals in girls' ovaries and in boys' testicles to start the process of sexual maturation. What I think is not as well understood is that it also starts a process of brain change that is really tough. And that brain change happens in what is known as the prefrontal cortex, which is the part of the brain that is responsible for, it's kind of the CEO of the brain. It's responsible for impulse control and planning and perception and all of that sort of important stuff. So our kids, as they're going through these hormonal changes, often don't have the effects of their prefrontal cortex helping them.
I feel like is the worst if you're going through these changes.
Could it be the worst time, right?
Oh my gosh.
And it's a funny thing because I'm sure you've had your kids say, well, why are you yelling at me? And you're not yelling at all. But their ability to perceive that, because the prefrontal cortex isn't working properly, they can't perceive that. And so saying, before you say a thing, now I'm not yelling at you and I'm not angry, and rather than but, because they know it's coming after a but, right?
Right.
Yeah. And I'd really appreciate it if you would pick up your things now and let's get ready for dinner.
Great. So saying up front how we're feeling and what we're trying to express to them.
Exactly. And know that they are going to have periods where they just cannot hear you. And when they're in one of those hot moments, it will not help you to continue to talk. So your best bet is to say, gosh, I can see you're really upset. Let's just take a little break here and we'll come back together in about 10 minutes and we'll talk about it. And then actually take the break and don't engage.
Dr. Delahunty, that is such good advice and something that I will remind my spouse, and my spouse will remind me when we're in those moments too, because we get so frustrated with him and just lack of understanding or lack of reality check almost.
Right. And remember, it's confusing to them because what they're perceiving is not what you're saying. So your face does not necessarily match what they're hearing. And that perceptual distortion is really very confusing.
Wow, this is really
I feel like I'm nodding.
eye-opening.
Yes,
Yes, this is really powerful. I'm so happy you're here to walk us through this.
Oh, good.
So you said 9 and 10, it can start as the years go on. What could we expect? Or is there kind of an outline, or does it vary?
It is variable, and it's variable based on gender and culture and, genetics, but there is sort of a rhythm to it. Typically in girls, you'll start with some breast budding, just meaning a hard lump under one or both nipples. Typically it's just one initially. And then you proceed developing little hair under the arms and pubic hair. And then the breasts continue to develop. For boys, what we see first is the testicles grow. They actually start to get bigger, and then the shaft of the penis gets both longer and wider before they actually start having pubic hair development and axillary hair, underarm development. And so that's the usual process. How long will it take? Nobody knows.
Dun, dun, dun.
there we go again.
Oh, this is a really, it's a natural process, but hard to talk about,
It is
right?
hard to talk about. I feel like that's what parents want too, right? Is that suggestion on how can I talk to my kids about this and not feel so uncomfortable. I know in our house, it's really important to us to name the parts what they are and name what the function is and really give that language to our kids. And then, of course, help them with boundaries, body boundaries, right? That's really important too. And what would you suggest to parents? And I know you've done this for me and my husband so many times in visits, but how can you reassure that it's awkward, but it's necessary? How can it be not so awkward? What would you
Well, I think one of
us
the
with?
most important things, honestly, is that we don't wait until they ask why Aunt Susan is pregnant and how did that happen.
Right.
Let's start talking about how our bodies are changing really early on, and having a really good resource. I talked to you about the Boys Body Book, which is great for the boys and goes
Yes,
through
we do
step
love
by
it.
step developmental changes. For girls, there's several good books. There's one by the American Girl doll series called The Care and Keeping of You, or of Me, I can never remember. And there's another one called Celebrate Your Body, which is terrific. And it's really a celebration of all different body and body types. So having those books available, I think, helps. I also think having an open conversation. Allison, I really appreciate that you are talking about body parts as they are properly named. It's important for a lot of reasons, and their body function is also important. But as early as when our kids are toddlers and preschoolers, talking about, this is how boys go potty, but this is how girls go potty because they have different bodies, and just talking about that as openly as you can.
That's a great thing for our audience to hear, is that although these big changes, and the topic here is hormones, so we think teenagers, but really talking about our bodies early on and being open. And I think the more we as parents set the standard that it's not awkward and that you can talk to me about this and I'm going to talk to you about this, just really opens the door for important conversations later to come that are necessary.
I really agree with that. And I also think they read your comfort. Schools, I don't think, are doing the talk until 5th grade. Some do it in 4th grade. And many girls are starting in 3rd grade. And so that is really hard. I have a little girl who's just started menstruating at 9, and boy, that's a tough one when you haven't learned about it in school yet, And I think parents, because they feel awkward about their own bodies and about the questions, often wait for the school to kind of lead. And I think you want to maybe take the reins a little bit so that none of that comes as a surprise to your child, and that we look at growth and changes in caterpillars and butterflies, for instance, in flowers, in all kinds of things. An older cousin, look how she's grown. She's turning into a woman. Those kinds of conversations are really appropriate.
And I think too, like our boys have asked questions of us, and I always have to stop and think, okay, what should I say in this moment? What's appropriate? What where I'm always the one that's the most uncomfortable, but they're asking me because they want to know. And I think another important thing for parent listeners to hear and to remember is that you want to be the one to give the information. Like, I want to be in control, I guess, of what Charlie and Logan and Franklin know and when they know it. And I want to be able to help them set that boundary and give the information in a way that feels safe and appropriate for our family. Not hearing it from a friend at school, not on the bus, not, in a different way. So
I really agree with that. And there is so much misinformation that is spread on in buses and on playgrounds, etc. And Allison, although you feel awkward, your boys don't, because they trust
they
you.
don't.
They come to you and they really want the answers. So, for each of us as parents, when they ask the questions, look at those trusting eyes and know that they want information that's appropriate for their given age. Mm-hmm. And starting early and talking about bodies often really matters. Another reason why we want to be sure that people are using the proper language. God forbid somebody's child is injured by somebody else. We want to be sure that that child can report what's happened to them in understandable language.
Right. Really important too. And then also I think telling our kids, okay, this is information that your grown-ups have given you. It is not your job to be the grown-up for your friends too. I think that's important too.
I agree with you very much. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. All right. So hormones, body changes, all come with moods. Oh,
indeed.
So we know that behavior is a communication tool. All behavior, positive, negative, all of that is telling us something. There's a need not being met. There's something that needs to be communicated. I have a kindergartner right now, and he comes home and he's kind of cranky because he's hungry and tired from school all day long. So thinking about sleep, stress, hunger, how can we help our kids, especially those who think they don't need as much sleep, with that?
I think the sleep issue primarily is so enormous right now. And I think getting kids the proper amount of sleep for age really matters. It is hard myself to manage my emotions when I'm exhausted. And so for kids who don't really even understand what these crazy emotions are, it's really hard. I think also letting them know that you don't have to know why you want to cry. Just cry.
Yes.
It's okay.
Yes. We just said that this week in our house.
Good.
Yes.
Good. That's
Remember,
terrific.
this is typical. Feeling like you want to cry and not knowing why is totally normal. Isn't that crazy?
Totally.
Yes.
And
Yes.
also modeling when you feel frustrated or tired or whatever, modeling how you can manage those emotions in a more positive way. Things like, I'm feeling a bit cranky right now, and I don't think I'm my best self. So I'm going to just go give myself a little break and take 15 minutes to myself, and then I'll be back, and I bet I'll be a better mama,
I think that's great. And that's so powerful because you're doing what's best for your family. You're being an example of self-care and self-awareness.
Right.
So
And you're
many-
modeling taking a break when it's tough. Take a break. Nothing has to be said right away.
Right. And then when we offer them a break, it's not a punishment.
Right.
It's, no, I've modeled this. I'm allowing you. Man, I would give anything for a 15-minute nap right now. Here, man. Yeah. Go.
Go ahead.
Yes.
Exactly.
Yes. So hours of sleep, I had looked this up somewhere. Middle schoolers need 9 to 11. Is that reasonable?
It's a lot, isn't it? It seems crazy. But yes, growth takes a ton of energy. And so they really do need that. They need it for mental clarity. They need it for healing, as their bones are and soft tissues are growing. So it's really real, and it is really hard. And so I think, there are several things that we need to talk to our kids about. For instance, many families are choosing to not use electronics at home during the school week, but it can be used on a Friday and Saturday, and then on Sunday again is a school night, so we're not going to do that. It does facilitate getting to bed more quickly and reducing the amount of stress in the family over that.
Yes. And I think looking at a screen too, I find this with myself. If I can reduce that, I fall asleep easier. What a wild
Right.
concept.
Yes.
So, in our house too, okay, we want to head to bed in an hour. Think about what you're doing for this last hour. Be purposeful about staying off devices, having that wind down time.
Right, exactly. And it can be, doing things as a family, play Yahtzee, or, everybody sits down and reads a book for a bit. I think parents really need to model that they're not on their screens, they're not flipping through their phones or on a tablet. They're actually with their child during this period. Remember that eating right before bed tends to make it harder to fall asleep. So we want to get all those calories in before an hour before bedtime. And keeping your child's room comfortably cool also matters.
Yeah, we have hot sleepers in our house. So I would definitely agree with that. I want to go back to the food point. As they become more independent in these tweeny teen years, they're choosing more of their foods.
Right.
So any tips or tricks for us here and our listeners about really encouraging that healthy diet? I think that is so key to, again, that mood and that growth.
Right. I do think it's really helpful for you all the way through, from the time they're toddlers, preschoolers, having that conversation about, boy, I just had some good protein and I feel so much better. I know that I feel better if I'm not getting as much sugar. Or if your child is not at their optimal self and they're, you might ask them, now, have you had anything to eat? Are you feeling hungry? What was it that you chose to eat? Oh gosh, I know that when I eat simple carbohydrates or when I eat that, it tends to make me not feel as good. I wonder if that's part of the problem here, because this is not your typical behavior. So talking about it all the way along about what makes our bodies feel good, what makes us feel strong, can be really helpful.
And again, I take what you said all the way back to when they're little.
Right.
Again, our audience here might be this tweeny hormonal age parent, but really new parents, taking this back to when they're little.
Right.
We always say you have to eat all the protein on your plate. And there needs to be a protein at every meal.
Good.
That's the size of your palm. Would you say that's what we've come to say? I don't know if that's valid or not, but
I think that's really legit. In the littles, of course, they eat their best meal at breakfast, not quite as good at lunch, and really crappy at dinner.
yes,
But the school-age kids tend to do a little better. I would say, yes, I think, when we're thinking about proteins, including is that egg, is that lentils, is that beans, so different forms of proteins as well. And then kids, once they've had their serving, I always think it's reasonable to say you can have, if they're still hungry, you can have more vegetable and you can have more protein, but we're not going to have any more starch. Right. So that's a rule. So I think it's very reasonable to offer them. I don't know that I would, it's sometimes hard to insist that they finish their protein, but I think that we all have a snack later based on how well we did with our dinner.
great point.
So, gosh, you weren't very hungry at dinner. Why don't you finish up that little bit of protein you have left? And then we'll talk about what's for your snack.
I think that's great. Just following up with them and then making that connection.
Right.
You're hungry now. You know what? At dinner, you weren't very hungry and
That's
didn't
right.
eat this, that, and the other.
Right.
And so making that connection.
And
Yeah.
as we know, proteins and fats stay with us longer than carbohydrates. And so, having that discussion with them too, I think you're hungry because you didn't have as much of the protein tonight.
Right.
That's really good for us to remember.
Right. So all the rights. The other thing,
Yes,
I
we
have
are
found-
keep nodding and agreeing with you. This is so great.
the other thing I have found is that, as teens and high schoolers, tweens and high schoolers, they are home without supervision and they're eating. So providing or putting out things that are good proteins or healthy choices so that the choices are ones I like.
Agreed. Not having the readily available junk is important. I think, if you can have the grapes washed so they can just grab the grapes, the apples are washed, let's grab one of those. Mm-hmm. Explaining to them about, if you're going to eat a Hot Pocket or whatever, you're not going to be hungry for dinner. And because, again, fats and proteins tend to empty from our stomach more slowly. And so, making sure that what is available to them is good, healthy stuff. And having them cook with you is such an important thing.
Yes, you inspire me. We've been talking about this. And so hearing you say it, I'm like, we have to make that happen. Yes.
Kids are more interested in eating it if they're invested in it.
Yes.
And so it really helps. And take them with you to the farmer's market or to the grocery store. Hey, let's pick a particular vegetable that looks kind of weird and figure out how to make it taste good.
Yes.
Oh, that's a great idea.
And just try different recipes and see what's delish.
Yes. Oh, all great ideas. Water. Tell us what you would suggest for water. I'm always convincing. We try to say you have to finish your whole water bottle in the day.
Mm-hmm. So it's a funny thing about water. We're really focused on water now and didn't used to be. When people ask me how much water they should drink, their urine should be relatively clear by about 3 p.m. That means you've had enough. We've gotten rid of most of the bilirubin and things like that are in our urine. And so I always feel like, drink an appropriate size. Make sure that the bottle that you're sending with your child with that rule is appropriate size for their body. Okay. And are all the schools, I don't know this, are all the schools allowing water bottles at the desks?
I believe so.
Oh, I think so.
Great.
I know.
That's awesome.
My personal classroom rule is you can bring your water bottle. Please bring your water bottle, but then it stays in your cubby. But you can get drinks when you need a drink.
That's
the
nice.
still factor in first grade's a little bit.
Indeed. But I do think that's a great rule. And I think having kids have that access matters so much. And so, yes, drinking water and milk. And you don't have to drink cow's milk. You can drink another form of milk, almond milk, soy milk, coconut milk, whatever it is, but something that's fortified with calcium and vitamin D.
That's terrific. All of this has been amazing.
Yeah. I guess just to kind of wrap up a little bit, I feel like the big messages we've gotten is just validate your kids' feelings, especially when they're just crabby for no reason, instead of getting crabby with them and kind of diving into that chaos.
Right.
Just, you're feeling upset right now. Things are hard. You're like, middle school is hard. Fourth grade's hard. Kindergarten's hard. I mean, it just validating their feelings, giving
really
them
important.
space to work through things, and modeling. I think that's so huge. I think we forget as parents that we are the first teachers and we have the power to really set them up for success when big feelings happen. And so I know that it's hard for me to say, oh, I'm feeling really frustrated. I'm walking away for 15 minutes. But that is really, you made a really good point with that, Dr. D, that it's so, so important to show your kids that that's okay. So that when we're asking them to go take a break, they're not feeling mad about it or that it's a punishment.
And I think, too, asking for what you need. I think it would help me if I had a hug. Do you feel up to hugging me right now? And then I'm going to just have a break because I'm feeling pretty sad, or whatever the emotion is. Work on that emotional vocabulary from the very early days and ask for your emotional needs to be met. Then your children can too.
Yes. And if they know that they can trust you because you've modeled this, you've modeled asking for what you need, and that they can come and talk to you about things and ask for what they need. Oh, that's really powerful. Yeah.
And it will help them at school. I know this is a trusted adult at school. I can ask them for what I need, and my needs will be met at school too. So it goes in both environments.
A lot of great things to take away here. So grateful that we could have this time together. Yeah. So focusing on nutrition is big. We can do that to support them, focusing on hydration and just acknowledging that these changes are coming. And, seek out others that are knowledgeable. I just appreciate the pediatrician that we go to, and I know Allison really adores you. So seeking out others that are in our community. This has been so great.
Absolutely.
The one other thing I wanted to touch base on, things that we can tell our kiddos to really help them to lessen that stress and all the negative changes. Exercise, I was thinking, would be a great one.
Oh,
What do
yes.
you recommend with those teens that would rather be on their phone than exercising?
That is a really important thing, especially with how our seasons change and our days shorten. I think when kids get home from school, they're typically hungry for a snack, and doing a little snack and then, come on guys, let's go out for a walk if you have that availability. If you're at work, you don't get home until after dark. As a family, everybody grabs a flashlight and away we go.
Yeah.
And we go out together and take a nice walk. Kids are often overscheduled with athletics rather than underscheduled, in my experience. And so they get a lot of exercise. But for those kids who don't, having restrictions on their electronics almost forces activity. And that's a good
Yes.
thing.
Yes.
Did
And
you know we're
having-
the only family with a timer on the Nintendo? The only family.
I bet you are the only
Dare
family.
you, Mom, set a timer so we have to ride our bike.
So we set a timer back in the beginning, and it's funny because our boys will call each other out now. I don't say
Good.
anything. They will call each other out. You've been on longer. No, you're not telling the truth. And so it is
That's
kind of a joke. I also have found simply providing the basketball, simply having
Yes.
a bin. My boys are sports boys. They'll go out. Come on, let's go throw the football. Come on, let's go out and see how many golf balls we can hit into the pine tree. I mean, kids are creative.
Yes.
They are. So
And
just
they need that freedom
showing
to,
them.
yes, they need the freedom to imagine. You know, if it's get a butterfly net so you can go outside and look for butterflies, whatever it is. But you're right, having the availability of the tool
Yes.
to encourage you to get outside and use
Right.
that imagination.
Right. All great. Gosh, so grateful again that you could be there. This was
Such
terrific.
a pleasure. Thank you for asking.
Thank you for tuning in today. Stay tuned for our next podcast. And as always, if you have any questions, you can email us at connections@hudsonraiders.org.
We have a lot more conversations ahead in our Parenting with Pride series. You can find the Hudson School District Podcast Library on our website, hudsonraiders.org, under the Families tab, and on Spotify. If you have questions, send an email to connections@hudsonraiders.org.